Hey guys, today we look at the hip flexors and my 3-step way to releasing them. Stay tuned until the end of the video to see my favorite way to mobilize the hip joint capsule. Perfect way to get that little bit more out of the release. So, let's get into the video. So first off guys, we need to release up the muscle fibers in the hip flexors. We need to get them moving, get some blood flowing through them. So we're going to start with a couple quick knee raises, and we're also going to work these through some circular movements. Building this warmth and movement in the hip flexors will allow us to work into them just that little bit easier. So we're just going to do 10 of the knees up, 10 of the knees circular in the clockwise position, and 10 in the anti-clockwise position for both legs. So next exercise, we're going to lay on our back, and we're just going to do some knee raises. You've brought your knees up, we're just going to extend them out so that we're nice and straight, and then bringing them back up. This is going to bring a lot of blood into the psoas and really get those hip flexors moving. And so we're just going to extend our legs out and bring them back 10 times, and that should be enough to get that bit of blood flow through there. And last but not least, we're just going to do a quick bit of movement through the adductors and abductors so that they're actually a little bit looser on the joint capsule itself. So just simply swinging the leg from left to right or right to left depending on the leg that you're doing it with, going all the way out and then bringing it all the way back in. There's no need to overextend either way on this exercise. We're just doing it for a little bit of movement through there. And we're just going to go through this movement 10 times each leg. So step 2 is to release the muscle fibers. There's a few ways to go about doing this. We can use foam rollers, we can self-massage with our own hands, or my personal favorite, we can use lacrosse balls. Now you can use any type of ball, as long as it's hard enough that you can get some pressure into the muscle. You can find a link down in the description for the foam rollers and the lacrosse balls that I prefer. Some are a little bit better than others. They're not expensive at all, but they are a must for releasing up the body. Today we're going to use a lacrosse ball, as the hip flexors are a smaller muscle group of the body, and being accurate with our release work through the hip flexors is really important. But if you don't have anything else, you can use another type of ball, a tennis ball, a cricket ball, anything of that regular sort of shape. So our first target muscle is the rectus femoris. So you can find this one going from the top of your hip all the way down to your knee. It is the driver of the quads. So to release this one, we're just going to work on the top third of the muscle. I like to sit down to do this one. Place the lacrosse ball in your hand and work from slightly the outside of where the muscle is and push into the muscle. This allows us to get onto every muscle fiber, including the ones that are slightly deeper. Work into it from both sides so you get different angles on the muscle. You'll also notice that as I'm doing this, the muscle is slightly stretching, where you can see the tape running. If you find any hot spots or spots where you feel just a little bit more pain than what you are feeling in other areas of that rectus femoris, hold the ball on that spot until you feel that pain subside a little bit. Our next muscle, guys, is the psoas. It's a little known muscle. Most people don't actually realize that it exists, but it will pack a punch. And if you're really feeling that tightness in the hip joint itself, chances are this is the one that's causing it. It comes from your lumbar vertebrae and attaches down just below the hip joint on the lesser trochanter of the femur. If you've ever had back pain from doing crunches or sit-ups, chances are this is the muscle that was fatiguing out. To release the psoas, we simply lay face down on the ground, take our lacrosse ball, and we're just going to feel for the V shape of the abs. Move 1 centimeter or 2 below here, applying the pressure with your body onto the lacrosse ball. It should feel quite hot like we experienced with the rectus femoris, and sometimes the pain can be a little bit sharp. If it is, don't be too worried as long as the pain is bearable. Once you find this pain, just rest on that area for around a minute or so and you should feel that pain subside and the tightness slowly going away. Find a few points for each side of the body and then move on to the next release. The next muscle is the TFL. Now this one is not fun to do self-release on, and it is common to feel pain sort of shooting down towards the foot. If you do experience this while releasing it, don't worry too much. If it's too much, just back off of it. The TFL is a really short little muscle. It attaches from the top of the pelvis down to the greater trochanter of the femur, or the very top of the femur, right where the hip is. It works hip flexion and hip abduction, or moving away from the body. To release it, place your lacrosse ball on the ground, position it to press into the outside of the hip, find the top of the pelvis and push in just below there. Move the ball around until you do feel a bit more of a painful, almost numbing sensation. Again, if you get any of those burny hot spots, hold on those because those are the spots that we really want to release up. With this one, if you do want to intensify it, you can rock your leg backwards and forwards, and it will sort of cross fiber friction between those muscle fibers and give you that little bit more release. So releasing these muscles needs to happen so that the next step, our stretching, we can get the most out of. This is the difference between gaining a small amount of travel throughout the muscle and seeing a substantial difference in the pain and tightness levels. Now that we've released all of the necessary muscles, we can move on to stretching them out. There's a few key rules to follow while you stretch, and keep this in mind for any stretching that you do in the future. It takes around 2 minutes to allow the muscle to accept that extra range of movement that you're creating and to retain that extra movement in that muscle. So make sure you are holding that stretch for at least 2 minutes. Stretching isn't comfortable. We are forcing muscles into positions that they aren't regularly in, or sometimes have never even been into. This means they are going to fight back. If it is too painful, ease off and find a level of stretch that is more bearable, and one session won't cut it. Stretching should be part of your daily or weekly routine. One session will have a small difference, but for lasting results, consistency is always key. First off, guys, we have a quad stretch. So just bring your foot up behind your back. To intensify this one, activate your glutes and you'll feel the hip will sort of slide forwards. If you are having trouble keeping your balance, make sure you're doing it next to a wall so that you can grab onto that. Hold this one for around about 2 minutes at each side, and then move on to the next stretch. Next up, we have what we call the couch stretch. So find somewhere next to a wall. What we want to do is bring our foot up against the wall and bring your knee as close to the wall as possible. Once you've done that, we are activating the glutes to intensify the stretch. You will feel this one running straight down the front of the quad and into the hip flexor a little bit as well. This is awesome for opening up the hips and giving us that little bit of extra range of movement. 2 minutes each side for this one, as per usual. And last but not least, we're going to come down onto our knees, sitting back onto our feet. And from there, we're just going to grab the ground and push our hips forward. You'll feel this running straight down the front of the quads and the hip flexors. This stretch and the couch stretch can be quite intense, so just ease your way into both of them and try your best to hold them for 2 minutes. Now that we've made our way through all of this, we're done. Your hips should feel pretty good now. I would recommend doing this 2 to 3 times per week if your hips naturally are quite tight. After a few sessions, you'll notice the effects are a lot longer lasting. Now for the little bonus that I promised you guys. We're going to traction our hip socket. That means we are basically going to gap to the hip joint and release that connective tissue inside of the hip joint. To do so, we first need to be laying on our side with our top leg brought up towards our body and our bottom leg out straight. With the arm that is against the ground, we're going to position our elbow below the hip joint. Place your fist against your leg as close to the hip joint as possible. Then with the other arm, we're going to push down on the leg just above the knee until you feel a slight pulling through the glute. And what we're actually doing is we're getting leverage from the positioning of our fist against our leg. And as we're pushing down, we're really forcing that hip joint to separate. Hold this for 2 minutes on each side. And we are finished. I hope you enjoyed the video and you've learned something new. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments section. Give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more great videos in the future. While you're here, check out this warm up for squats or this other video. Until next time, stay mobile.